Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today we're going to be showing you how to install the Hellwig front anti-sway bar here on our 2004 Ford F-53 chassis. If you own a motorhome, then you know that sway is just an inevitable issue that's always going to be happening whenever you're hauling around in your motorhome. Now, there are a few ways that you can help mitigate that, with one of them being a front anti-sway bar. And essentially what this is going to be is a cross member between your two frame rails. So with this being a big hulking box with a lot of weight up top, so it's a lot of side to side movement, and like I said, with it being a box, there's going to be a lot of crosswinds, and then just the general wind that's going to be out in the environment that's going to be pushing against us. And since we have these big flat fronts, it's not really aerodynamic, and that's really going to be pushing us around and kind of shifting that weight back and forth. And typically when you have a motorhome, a lot of weight isn't really going to be dispersed evenly. You're typically going to have a lot of weight on one side. Maybe you only have one slide out, and that slide out's your kitchen and your dinette, and that's hauling not only the dinette, but now you also got your fridge, you got a bunch of other stuff that's really starting to weigh it down. Or in most cases, the generator is typically going to be up at the front, and those onboard generators are pretty heavy. So having that extra stability with that cross member of the anti-sway bar running in the front is going to help give you more stability, shore up those two frame rails, and help keep them from wanting to twist and turn and then throw you as you start to make turns or when you're getting those crosswinds. So to give you a better look at our sway bar, here it is already installed. And since this is made of spring steel, what it's trying to do is every time we start to lean to one side and it starts pulling or pushing on either end here, the spring is basically going to want to just pop itself back to its original form. So that's going to help keep our frame rails running straight. It's not going to allow them to kind of try and turn side to side there. The big thing here is the thicker the bar that you get, the more strength it's going to have, and that's what's really going to help give you that anti-sway. So when you're looking at this, typically most motorhomes are going to have one already standard. Your vehicles are supposed to have one standard. So what you're going to want to do is measure the diameter of the bar that you already have, and then make sure that you're going with one that's a little bit bigger. Roadmaster, another one of our vendors that also sells anti-sway bars, has stated that 1/8 of an inch is about a 20% difference in performance. So if we take that with Hellwig here as well, I'm gonna assume that's probably still the same. I don't really think there'd be a difference, even though there are slight differences between the two options here. The thicker the bar, the better you're gonna get out of it. So make sure that you're double checking that. There are a few other things that you want to check as well. So in our case, we're gonna be wanting to look at what our chassis is. So with this one being a 2005 motorhome, we want to make sure that we know that the chassis was made a year prior, so that's going to be a 2004 chassis. Once we know that, we also want to go and look at what our GVWR is, because each one of these is going to have a specific weight class that it's going to want to sit in. So if you make sure that you have the right chassis, the GVWR is right, and then just kind of get under here and look for any kind of issues that you might find when it comes to actually installing it. So some kits, you'll find that they maybe have some special instructions. The front, usually not a problem. Typically it's the rear where you're going to start running into some issues with fitment just because there's other things in the way. Maybe there's already a factory rear anti-sway bar, and then the new one is supposed to work with it, but it just doesn't fit right. So there's a lot of little minor things that can end up potentially ruining your install here. But if you just take the time, get a little bit of the facts up at the front and do your research, you can make sure that you're getting exactly what you need. Along with that, the other thing here is going to be maintenance. So make sure that you're getting under here every so often and checking the torque on each one of your bolts. If you do that, your bar is going to last a whole lot longer, and it's going to give you better performance in the long run here. A lot of the time what I see on some older motorhomes is the bushings wear away, so it's a good idea to check both bushings every once in a while. Maybe you need to take it off and lubricate it. In that case, I'd reach out to Hellwig and figure out exactly what lubricant they're using so you can keep using that and not have any kind of issues with different lubricants not being chemically compatible. So as far as installation goes, front anti-sway bars are typically going to be a piece of cake. These are really just swapping out like for like, with the only issue typically being just the old hardware being corroded. If that is the case for you, just get out there a little bit beforehand, spray it down with some penetrating oil, and you can give it a couple of swipes with a wire brush to help kind of clean out any gunk that might be in the threads of that hardware. If you find that your hardware isn't salvageable, please feel free to reach out and we can help you find out which hardware is going to be the correct replacement for your specific kit. But with all that being said, I do think you could do this at home. You don't need a lift. You could honestly just lay under there. There's typically going to be a lot of space at the front of a Class A motorhome. So, like I said, you can do this at home, but if this is something where you just don't feel comfortable, or maybe you just don't have the time to dedicate to actually swapping these out, then please feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code to find a shop locally to get it professionally installed. If you are wanting to do this yourself, then stick around and I'll walk you through the process. All right, so starting off our install, we have our vehicle lifted up. Now, normally you'd probably just be doing this on the ground. If you are doing this on the ground, you do want to make sure that you have your wheels chalked and that you have the parking brake on. In our case, we are up. This is being held up by the suspension instead of by the frame. You do not want to do this while you have it by the frame. It's going to throw off your spacing here for the end links, so make sure that you are lifting by the suspension if you do lift up. And then once you are all prepped, ready to go, you're going to start out by disconnecting your end link for your front factory sway bar. So that's this guy up here, and I've got a 15mm socket on the bolt head, and then on the inside of the frame rail here is where the nut is, and on that I've got an 18mm wrench, and we are going to pop this bolt out. That'll drop down our end link, and we'll do the same thing over on our driver's side as well. Once we get that top one loose, this will start to wiggle for us, but right now it's so tight up there that it's pinching that in right now, and I'm not going to be able to get that out. But since we're getting rid of both of these before we mount up our new bracket, that won't be a problem. So now that we have our end links separated, we're now going to loosen up the bolts that are holding on our bracket, tying us into the axle here. And what I'm going to do is loosen them all up most of the way, but not all the way, just because I do want to have something to help support this until I'm ready to pull it down. So on the back side, the nut is going to be 18mm again, and the bolt head side is going to be 15. And we'll pop these loose. There we go. All right, now that I got them all loose, I'll pop out that last one, slowly bring it down, and then we can set it aside. If you want to, now would be a good time to come back with a wire brush, just clean up your space here, get off some of that corrosion. So just to give you a little side-by-side view of our two different sway bars. Here we have our factory one, and then right below it I have our new Hellwig one, and the big difference here is really just going to be that thickness between the two. So our factory one's only 1.5 inches. Our Hellwig one is going to be 1 3/4 inches, so we're gaining 1/4 inch in thickness for this entire sway bar, and that's just going to give us a much sturdier base and more strength when it tries to pull the motor home one way or the other and the frame starts to twist. It's going to want to pull it right back to exactly where it was factory. So major difference in the ride quality once this gets installed. So with our old sway bar removed, we're going to have our new end links, and you can see that there's a bend in it. We want that bend facing towards the center of our motor home. So on the driver's side, I would be mounting it up just like this. And with our frame rail, we're going to be using these black bolts that are included with our kit, and the bolt is going to be on the inside of the frame rail with the threads sticking out towards the center of our motor home. And then we'll finish that off with one of the included flange nuts. That'll just thread right on. We'll tighten that down and then torque it as well. So I'm going to get this up in there, and we'll see. All right, bolt 1 through, Second one in place. It'll line up. There we go. Do right on our nut. And we'll repeat this process over on the passenger side as well. All right, now we're gonna torque these down. I found using a short well socket the easiest on the top bolt up here. On this bottom one, we are gonna have to use a crow's foot. There's just not enough space for me to get that in there with these hard coolant lines in the way. So we'll get this torqued. It's probably really close anyway because I did it really tight when I was wrenching down. So let me swap back over. Get my wrench down here. All right, now we need to lube up our bushings. And in your kit, you're gonna see this lube right here. And I highly recommend wearing some gloves because this stuff kind of gets everywhere. And we're just gonna lube that all up. All right, I'm gonna try to avoid getting more of this on my gloves since I just swapped them out. I've laid the bushing down on the ground and it's gonna be on this corner and over on the other corner. And the design of this is just a flat cut right through it. So I'm hoping I can kind of push through without getting this all over me. There we go. Now we're going to be installing our new sway bar, and to do so we're going to be reusing the factory hardware. So I've been letting this soak in penetrating oil just because it was pretty rusted out, not too good. So I just threw it in here, let it swish around a little bit, and it's been sitting there for about 30 minutes now. Kind of help clean it up. And another thing I like to do is just put up some straps just because I'm doing this all by myself. It's a little bit harder to kind of hold everything up, get everything tightened down while also, you know, holding the whole weight of the bar on you. So what you can do is just run some cam straps, buckle straps, anything like that that can actually support that weight. We'll stick that arm in on both sides. I'm gonna try and even this out a little bit more too. Get it in on both sides, have the straps help support it. That way it's a whole lot easier trying to push up against it and get the nuts and bolts all in place. So with that said, I'll get started here. Just make sure that holds up. There we go. And then as needed, you can just start to tighten up your straps. Mine are kind of stuck right now, so they're not gonna give me too much help, but I'll have enough to help push my bolts up in place. There we go. Now I'm gonna snug each one of these down, and as I start getting closer, I'm gonna try and push the bracket up a little bit because you can see the slots in our mounting brackets here going onto the axle or bolt is right in all the way at the top. So I want to kind of even that out. I'm gonna get that more in the center. As you see, we're kind of flat right here with our two brackets, but down here I have a bunch of overhangs. So like I said, just snug it down a bit, then you can kind of play with it and get it just centered perfect. And then also while we're doing that, we can center our bar here. So you can measure you know, what your spacing is on the outside here. That'd probably be the best way to do it. So then you can just match up both sides when they're both the same measurement from the edge of your bushing out to the outer edge of it, then you know you have it centered. All right, I've got these snug down. I've got it so it's even on both sides here. And then just to make sure that our sway bar is centered, it looks like we were right at 3 inches from the outside of our bushing here. And right at 3 inches over on the other side as well. So we know our bar is centered. Next step's gonna be twisting this up, figuring out what setting we're gonna need height-wise with our end link. I'm pretty sure this one doesn't come with any other kind of adapter. Like typically Roadmaster will have a couple slots in theirs, which will let you kind of make this as level as possible, which honestly this is pretty good just with that one setting. So they must have really did their math on this one and made sure that this was the right fit. So I think we're pretty much good with that. We're gonna grab our 5/8 hardware, and that's what we're gonna use to connect our sway bar up to our end link. Now with our 5/8 hardware, we're gonna slip on a flat washer. That's gonna run through the end link as well as our mounting bracket here. And then on the other side, we're gonna have another flat washer and then one of our lock nuts. And we're going to be doing this with the bolt head facing outwards so that all of our threads are facing inward. Not going to interfere at all with our leaf springs there. Let's see if I can line this back up. There we go. There we go. All right, now typically, at least in my case, every time I've done a anti-sway bar, you're usually just getting these until they're just tight because we don't want to crush the bushings that are on our end links. And on this case, the instructions tell you you're torquing them down. So we will be snugging these down and then also torquing them as well. I'm going to be using a 24mm socket and wrench to do so. So I'm going to get each of these tightened down and we'll go from there. All right, I've snugged down my end link bolts. I'm gonna also torque the axle bolts as well. Normally you'd want to be torquing down on the nut side, but unfortunately there's just no room to get in there and do it. And even with a crow's foot, it's gonna just honestly be a challenge. So we're gonna be torquing on the bolt head here. Luckily it's honestly not too tight of a torque. That one's good. All right, now with all bolts torqued down, that'll do it for the installation. Well, that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the Hellwig front anti-sway bar here on our 2004 Ford F-53 chassis. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right front anti-sway bar for your motorhome, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.